Gun violence continues plaguing the city of Toronto, and the city's youth advisory body, the Toronto Youth Cabinet, is calling out on governments to put more structures in place to tackle the issue. The Cabinet's Executive Director, Mensah, joins us now to talk about what's at stake, along with the solutions being proposed. First of all, let's start with the Toronto Youth Cabinet, what it's about and what it is that you do.
Yeah, so the Toronto Youth Cabinet was established in 1998 by Toronto City Council to advocate on behalf of Toronto's over 600,000 youth. And so that's our mandate given to us by Council to amplify the voices of Toronto's young people.
Now, obviously, there are a number of issues across the board in this city when it comes to the city's young people. However, recently, there's been a lot of highlights in terms of gun violence in the city and trying to make sure that the young people aren't getting to the point where they're getting involved in these situations. And you recently, over the last month, have made a few calls.
Yeah, so the Toronto Youth Cabinet has been vigorously calling for the city to take on upstream community-driven responses that have proven to be effective to addressing the rise in gun violence that we're seeing. So first, we're calling to ensure every neighborhood improvement area in the city has an active youth space and youth hub. Second, we're calling for the creation of a summer youth employment program to ensure that young people have access to meaningful and gainful employment. I'm always saying that the best antidote to crime is a good job, and young people need those opportunities that will help them towards a positive path forward. And third, we're calling for funding towards violence prevention grants to support grassroots youth-led organizations and the work they're doing to impact communities.
We hear about incidents on a regular basis now in this city. Some would argue that we're not seeing as many incidents perhaps as the past, but you see things differently.
You know, I do see things differently, especially over the last 4 months. We've seen the rise in gun violence, and the numbers are worse than the last 5 years. But I think even more so, we have to pay attention to the fact that young people are disproportionately perpetrating these acts of violence, as well as disproportionately being impacted by these acts of violence. So it really depends on what metric people are using, but we know gun violence in the city of Toronto is trending younger and younger, and our young people are disproportionately affected by it.
So these calls you're making to the city to do more at this point,
yeah.
The city has, over the last few years, said we're actually implementing some programs and policies in place now. Why do you think they haven't been successful?
Well, first, there's still a shattered sense of safety in the city of Toronto, and that's due to decades of purposeful disinvestment in our equity-deserving communities. And so I think the big thing I'm always saying is, and that young people are telling us, is that, yes, you might say these things are available to us, but we can't access it. Accessibility and availability are two different things. And I think also we have to pay attention to the fact that the city has not been vigorous in their steps towards supporting young people. We're still not taking on the real measures that we need, but I also want to point out we need long-term, predictable, and sustainable funding. It's not worth just throwing $200,000 for 2 months out of the year and then ignoring young people 10 months for the rest of the year. We need consistent funding. Our organizations, our youth, not only need it, but they deserve it.
Obviously, the ultimate goal would be to make sure that there's no gun violence at all. However, It's not going to happen overnight. So how do you see the timeline from now till we get to a point where you're happy?
Honestly, my hope is for young people to be surrounded with a bounty of opportunity and resources. Now, young people should not live in communities that are full of violence, poverty, precariousness. And so how we're going to get out of this is, like I said, invest in those community-driven responses, those upstream solutions, and those root causes of violence, which we know are going to help us get out of this epidemic. But I think the big thing is opportunity, and the big thing also is providing young people with a hope for a better future. Unfortunately, Toronto's young people, especially our most vulnerable youth, have lost that hope for a better future. And so until we reach a point where a young person is optimistic about their future and where they don't feel the need to go carjack or go grab a gun, we're going to continue to see the situation that we're seeing today. And until we stop investing in downstream approaches of policing first, because policing our way out of this epidemic is not going to get us out of it.
Mensah from the Toronto Youth Cabinet, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Mike.